Today's guest is Dr. Michelle Gordon, who ran a multi-million dollar surgical practice from 2005 to 2020 and grew it to five surgeons. Despite all of her success and the success of her practice, she was constantly burned out and decided to close it down to recover. As she healed, she learned that it's possible to bounce back quickly without suffering when we have access to the right tools. This led her to create Launch Your Life, which is a community of professionals working towards their ideal life one habit at a time. As a result, community members often have vast life improvements in as little as 4 weeks. Dr. Michelle, thank you very much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
You're very welcome. And I know we were doing a bit of speaking offline before this started, and there's a lot of similarities in our stories and kind of how we got to stop doing what we were doing and then transition into much more fulfilled work. So I'd love for you to just add to that and give us, the context of your story and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, it's kind of it's very interesting how I became a surgeon. Um, I decided at age 5 I had to be a doctor. And the reason I decided I had to be a doctor was because of a conversation I witnessed my mom have about her brothers who were doctors. And she said something like, those guys are rich and they're doctors. And so my 5-year-old brain went to work and said, oh, you want to please your mom? You want to be rich. And the way to do that is to be a doctor. And so I built this subconscious program at age 5 and it ran. And I tried to do other things and I entered medical school at age 31 and did fine, went to medical school, did surgical residency, and then went into private practice. And it actually wasn't until January of 2019 that I uncovered this unconscious program because I never really understood why I never felt like I fit in medicine. And while I understand that most people don't feel like they fit in and most people, have those kinds of like issues, I just like always thought that I should have been in doing something with the brain or psychology or something. And I never really understood why I never felt it, fit in. And so that was an interesting kind of understanding. And I had been working toward kind of a digital nomad kind of life because I love to travel. I had the travel bug since the 80s. And when I uncovered that, the belief that I had to kill was I can only make money if I'm a doctor, if I'm working as a doctor. And that's still unraveling even today, many years later. And so I thought, I was in my late 40s and I was like, oh, menopause is a really hard time. I need to help women manage menopause. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of good information on it. And I started this business called the Menopause Movement. And I was working full time as a surgeon. I was making a lot of money and I hired people to help me. And what I found out was that people will take your money and do nothing. And that was quite a surprise for me. And before I knew it, I had a list of 15,000. And I said to the people who were growing this list for me, I'm like, well, I should be able to make a living off this list if it's 15,000 people. And they hadn't set up any follow up or any of the normal things that you have to do with an email list. And not knowing what I didn't know, I like hung on to that list for a long time until like I don't know, maybe a year ago I cut it because it was like why am I carrying these people who don't really want me? Um so I had a lot of hard knocks kind of lessons in figuring out the online space, trying to follow this guru or that guru and realizing that just because it worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for me. And the and then I realized that I don't give a shit about menopause. I don't care. Menopause is just an opportunity for reinvention like it was for me. And so how can I help women menopause isn't the problem. The problem is like you, me. And menopause is such a great time for women because men don't go through it, but for women it's like another puberty. And so it can be really disruptive, like super disruptive. And so I thought, well, how can I help women in this time of life? And it can be really disruptive for someone like me who is a surgeon or a CEO or anyone in a C-suite or a high powered professional. And how can I help them like really reevaluate because it is such an opportunity for reevaluation. And that's where Launch Your Life got started. And so that's kind of where I am now, figuring out how to start all over again.
Love it. Love it for many different reasons, right? From the reinvention reasons, from the following the threads of life, and really at each step, like unpacking more of like, well, what is authentically me? Like what is beyond these, like at 5 years old, I'd picked up meaning towards something that actually had nothing to do with who I authentically was. And now I'm unpacking it through these later stages of life. And I think it's a beautiful story of like following that thread. And I think it's so synonymous with what I do and the experience that I find when I work with clients. It's not really about adding anything in, or we talk about transformation, but the way that I do transformation is really like unlearning and cutting off the pieces that aren't you, because inherently underneath the part of you that's there, like it's whole, it knows exactly what you want and knows how to move you forward. Us getting in our own way is really just the layers that are caked on top that are distorting that inner, very high vibe voice. So
Yeah.
I just want to reflect that back, and by all means, if you want to
You
comment
know,
on that.
I think that it's really interesting because especially for doctors, there's a lot of doctors who want to leave medicine or want to figure out how to use their knowledge to help other people. And we go into medicine because we're altruistic. I mean, that's why we go into medicine, because we want to help people. And then we get into it and we go through the medical system, the medical training system, which intentionally doesn't teach business, intentionally only teaches ways to use drugs in America. And and we miss a whole lot of natural healing and other ways. And so as we do that, then what can happen is, like then COVID, right? And COVID was this time where the medical profession especially just had to work, and there's a lot of burnout, and there's a lot of people really wondering, is this really the life I want? And so for me as a doctor, I was like, okay, I know I can help people. I want to do online education. And I bought from the gurus. I went through launches with, I don't want to mention any names, but we'll say bro marketers. And then I, bought their upsells and their expensive, 5-figure coaching. And what I found out was that, first of all, they don't give a shit whether you succeed or not. They just want your money. They got your money, everything's fine. And and just like what I said, people will take your money and not really follow through. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, that the responsibility is mine. And what I tried to do was kind of delegate it off before I really knew what I was doing. And that's that's what I was talking before about throwing money at a problem. That's what I was trying to do. Now in medicine, what we do is we hire specialists. We bring a specialist in, and the specialist is going to take care of the kidneys, you know, or the lungs or whatever. And I mean, you're still there and you're still taking care of the patient, but you're delegating that off. And I actually had that mindset that I could delegate certain things off without understanding how they worked. And for me, that was a disservice because it just, without really knowing what I needed to shed and who I needed to be, what happened for me was I just felt crappy and I didn't understand why. And I was working with these people who were supposed to help me succeed, and nothing was happening, and I was just losing money, and I was like, this isn't making sense. Why is this happening? And for me it was a deep dive into, okay, who am I? And how do I want to do this for me? And how can I bring more of me into this? And what do I hate about myself, and how can I turn that into love? I mean, so there was just so much self-loathing and so much like stuff from childhood and all that stuff I had to work through that made it easier then for me to kill the menopause movement in a sense and just kind of start all over.
Love it. I love the self-awareness of that. And yeah, sometimes these lessons definitely take a sting, and you
Yeah.
need to fall a few times to kind of figure out where you need to look. So I'd love to then bring it to the present and really dive into. So, what are the top problems that you're facing right now, whether it's personally as the leader of your business or within your business?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I tend to really get stuck with the shiny object syndrome. And the problem with having money is being able to spend it, right? So I well, I'm not retired and set for life, right? I'm okay for a few years. And I keep following, like, can I do that? And so I finally told myself, no, no more buying. And I have to use the things that I've actually purchased and the things that I find that are useful. But for me, it's focus and figuring out like what's the one thing. What see, beginners complicate and experts simplify. And what I realized was that I had built a Franken business with many different moving parts. And so what I did was I found the few things that I really loved about that business, the products that I really loved, and I am promoting those. And I realized that I don't necessarily have to see people every day. I think that for my lifestyle, what I need is a working evergreen funnel. And so that is what I'm working on. And those take time. That's like a holy grail. That's hard, right? But those take time. And so if it takes me a year or more to get the evergreen up and running, that's fine. In the meantime, I can still, meet with people and do some one-on-one and whatnot. But the main focus right now for me is like I sat down and I said, what kind of life do I want to live? I want to be location independent. How do I become location independent? It's not just chasing a, one-on-one client or a high ticket group client. It is more like, how can I create some sort of revenue that keeps going? And that's an evergreen funnel. And so but I have to keep reminding myself that's the one thing. That's the one thing.
Got it. So, that all sounds pretty clear. It makes sense. Seems like you know what you want there. So, what's the actual problem?
So the actual problem is that I forget and then I get distracted and I start working on, some new course or, um, creating the wrong, not staying consistent with the messaging or, so it really is a focus problem. It's my ADD comes into play.
Okay. And so I'll share with you my initial reaction. You can, by all means, this goes not just for now, but in general, like feel free to call BS on anything that I say, or like I don't disagree with that. I'm totally fine with it. Um, so my initial reaction to that is like, okay, so you're a very successful individual who obviously had to focus for a lot of different things to achieve everything that you've done. I mean, surgery by definition is very focused based. So when somebody like yourself tells me, well, here's a list of all of the things that I'm clear on and like what kind of business I want to build, but I kind of forget that from time to time. Like it's really just a focus issue. I find that hard to buy on the surface, meaning you have so much evidence from even just a short time that I've known you that like when push comes to shove, you can focus. And yes, the distraction like that affects all of us. I'm not talking about that, but this is like I'm clear on the fundamental thing that I want, and yet that eludes me. So I don't always associate that with focus. I think it's something deeper. So number one, what lands for you from that, if anything?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I'll say that when I retired from surgery in 2020, I ended up kind of lost in my identity because I had to figure out more about who I am outside of that job and who I am outside of bringing in that kind of money all the time, right? I haven't brought in any consistent, but I mean, I brought in some. I was okay, a couple $100,000. But like when you're making millions of dollars a year, $100,000 is like nothing, right? And so just it's like I think what happened for me was I let myself think that I could never make this happen. Like there wasn't any evidence for me to actually be able to reach this goal of having an online business that supported my lifestyle. And so, yeah, focus is something I can do when I put my mind to it, obviously, or I wouldn't be a surgeon. But at the same time, I think for me, just learning what was important in this new business model. It's easy for somebody like me to go and take care of somebody in a hospital. Like I know exactly the algorithm. I know exactly what to do to make a diagnosis, that sort of thing. But understanding how to write an email or how to do persuasive copy. I mean, just the learning curve for me was, there was so much to learn. And I felt like I was on a mountain that was just, there's the base of a mountain that was insurmountable. And no matter how much I hiked, I never went up. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. So what I would say then is, you had mentioned this line of, okay, well, I can never make this online business thing happen. Okay. To what, let's look at it this way. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely true, 1 being not at all, how true does that statement, not intellectually sound, but how true does it feel for you?
That I can never make it. So I am not in that headspace right now. Like
Okay.
I have recommitted to like figuring out whatever I have to do, because there's so much evidence that it can work. That I'm not the only person in the field who, who wants to build $1 million funnel or whatever, right? So and there's gazillion people out there who are doing it. And so it's just a matter of staying focused for me and not losing focus on the one thing.
Okay.
Which is
Agreed, which
yes.
makes sense. Like you did, there's evidence outside of me that this is obviously possible.
Right.
If you had to answer the original question though, scale of 1 to 10, like if you say it, just say the line out loud. So I can never make this online business thing happen. How true does it feel? And what's the number?
It does not feel true. It does
Okay.
not. So you want a number. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, whether it's true or not, 10 being true, I would say 2.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So if
I
this was
believe I can do
something,
it
okay. So this was something that was happening in the future, or sorry, in the
in
past,
the
and
past.
now it's not really a thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not. It was. I mean, if you and I had been talking, if we had been talking in November or early December, then I would be like, I have no idea what to do. I am so lost. I don't know what to do. But something happened. And I actually want to say that I think it was a commitment to exercise, which is crazy and weird. But there's something about the discipline of doing something every day for yourself that is magic. I don't know how to explain it, but I've always wanted to be an athlete. I've always been an athlete, off and on running and biking, and then I'll stop and I'll go into this weird like funk, and I won't do anything for months, and I'll gain 30 pounds, and I'm like, oh crap. And then I have to go back and do it again. And so I made this decision as like, this is not how I want to live. This is not the life I want. And so like I said, I took a really deep look at what kind of life I want to live. What does it look like when I get up in the morning? How do I spend my days? What do I want? What do I really want my life to look like? And what do I want my health to be like? And once I did that and I got a clear idea of what it is I want, it was easier to commit to actually just following through on my exercise. And then other things started falling into place after that, which is different. And maybe you've seen this happen for other people. I don't know. But just the whole belief system of, okay, I can do my exercise. And if I just do that during the day, that's a win. And anything else that happens along with it is kind of gravy. And that's really been where it's been. And when I'm not feeling motivated, I still do the exercise because I put it on my schedule.
Got it. Yeah, it's one of those like how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it's
Yeah.
reflective of everything, and it's like the rising tide rises all ships as well. right?
Yeah.
It's hard to
Yeah.
stay consistent in one area if you're inconsistent in another area. So the two piggyback off each other. So that makes
Yeah, it might just
absolute
be
sense.
congruence. It might just be a congruence thing. Like I wanted to do this, but I wasn't doing it. And so then, I felt guilty and had shame. And so I just kind of like threw in some compassion and just said, okay, let's just start over.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think then it would also come back to what I asked you near the beginning. It's like you got great self-awareness, right? You have a clear and evidenced ability to, manage your thoughts and move through things that come up in front of you that are obstacles and bumps in the road. So what exactly is the problem that you're facing right now?
Um, I think if I were to go to a high level of like what I would say my big problem is right now, it still would be self-belief. It was self-efficacy because of the history, because I feel like I've been a failure all along, and especially with this business. And so it really has to do with, I mean, I may have self-awareness and I may be able to control some thoughts, but I still have a fairly negative bitch inside my head. And
Okay.
I don't have to listen to her all the time, but she's still there. And the kinds of thoughts that come to me are, you've tried for so many years and it's just not going to work, and that sort of thing. And so if I were to say, if there were any obstacle right now, it would be that, like, still lingering doubt, even though it's a two, because I know just following the steps will get me where I want to go. But then there's always the self-doubt. So it's like on the other side. If that, am I making any sense at all? I mean,
A
it's super
hundred
high
percent.
level. I
No,
mean,
that's
because
okay.
like when you get to a certain level of success, um, for me, it's like the hardest thing for me is to find out where those limits are, because it's really hard to examine your own mind with your own mind. And that's where it's really helpful to have a coach to kind of help bounce things off of, and then to find, so from the outside I look really successful and really happy and all the things, but there are still like deep limits that I want to break through. And I would like to have 100 more clients, and I would like to have 10,000 more followers, and things like that. So what's keeping me from doing the things I need to do to actually make those things happen? That those are like the more high level, that's a higher level conversation.
Beautiful. So I appreciate you going there because I know it's not easy, and it's especially not easy when you're coming from success,
Yeah.
right? Oftentimes when you're on the come up and, like, let's just say this is your first foray into business, there's a sense of like, I got nothing to lose, right? Like I'm just doing this. It makes sense that I don't know it. So I'm going to like do what I can to figure it out, and I'm okay to face that. But when you have, and I say this in quotes, like a fall from grace moment to do this, like I've went from making millions of dollars to now like making thousands, like that's a massive drop in experience of evidence of my worth and ability and value that I provide to the world, even though it's a completely different industry and it makes all the logical sense internally, right? Especially for our ego, like it's like, what the hell's going on? Like this
Yeah,
is not
yeah,
what I
you've hit
signed
the
up
nail
for.
on the head, because it does come back to self-worth. And I haven't, I've spent a lot of time and effort working on being inherently worthy, because that's important if you're going to go into something, any sort of business, I think, and life, because we're all worthy just as we are. But I did put a lot of emphasis on how much money I was making and how that made me more valuable to the world.
Agreed. And if you connect it back to what you said at the beginning, the origin of that need, the origin of that behavior, the origin of that pattern is actually validation from a parent,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So money was the vehicle to try and fill a hole in my soul that can never be filled with money.
yeah.
Okay. So what's coming up for
And I'll
you?
never, well, the thing is like, I can't ever get that validation, because, I'll have to do it for myself. My mom passed away in 2006.
Correct.
Yeah.
So even if she was alive, there's no amount of money that would ever be able to fill that.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So what's coming up for you when I reflect that?
Yeah, so like I'm getting a little emotional thinking about, how I haven't I haven't looked at this. So now you're getting into some deep things that I haven't really looked at. And I wasn't blessed with self-aware parents. I was blessed with narcissistic parents who helped me navigate the world very differently. And not to say that I didn't learn lessons from them. I did, but and I don't regret anything. They did the best they could with what they have, and I've forgiven them and all that. But that acceptance part at age 5 was a real pivotal year for me, um and I actually don't know. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure.
Well, so first and foremost, beautiful reflection back. And, I acknowledge you for allowing yourself to be witnessed in really the delicate moment that is,
Yeah.
right? Because if it's something you haven't really addressed in a while, or haven't gone back to in a while, or haven't connected how it's showing up in your business, that 5-year-old space is a very delicate and vulnerable space. I just want to acknowledge you for that first and foremost. And then two, right, if you're saying, okay, so my parents had these narcissistic qualities, the biggest one of the biggest patterns with any narcissistic relationship is that one party always pours into like a bucket with no end,
Hmm.
right? Meaning the narcissist, because they lack their own ability to generate the self-worth and the self-honor that they get from others, always unconsciously put themselves in position to find people that are more than willing to pour into them in order to get their needs met, while simultaneously the poor, who always has a martyrdom type quality to them, continues to pour to find their own value. And that's what creates a dysfunctional relationship in them. Long story short, I say that because you said multiple times on this podcast, like, I just want to help people. I got into medicine to help people. I'm doing the things I'm doing now to help people. I want that impact. I want, like, there's a strong need to express a very kind part of you, which is beautiful. And it's probably a natural gift you had since you were a kid. So, as a kid who's very in tune, trying to navigate her way around the world and find her own needs to be met, latches on to narcissistic parents who are probably meeting their needs through their kid,
Yeah.
ties money into it. Now you have a recipe that has created a lot of success for you and has worked for you in many ways, but it's worked for you in its distorted fashion, not in its gift.
Got it.
So what lands for you when I reflect
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I think that I've always been trying to prove something. Whether it's to the biology teacher in high school who looked at me and said, "I know who's not going to do well in this class," um, with my A plus, because I was joking around at the beginning. If it's from that to being, proving to everyone that I was, more than competent as a surgeon and very successful financially. So, and like, who am I trying to prove this to? I mean, probably at the end of the day, I'd probably try and prove it to my mom, who's never going to acknowledge it, never would, even if she were alive.
Correct. So really what you're left with is learning how to find that validation, acknowledgement, and self-appreciation for yourself as an adult, and learning how to reconnect and reparent your inner child,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So
Oh,
what lands for you there?
yeah. I mean, it's so funny because I talk a lot about how it's our job as adults, to reparent our inner child. And I think I've done a lot of that. I mean, if you go and listen to my podcast, the last 7 episodes were kind of a memoir. And I made it from like birth to age like 10 or 12 or something. And then I had to stop for a while because it was really intense. I had a lot of abuse as a child. And so I've done a lot of this work, but it's so funny every time, like I mean, not every time, but like talking to you, it's like, there's more. There's always more. How could I shed this and then just be all me and not be ashamed?
So I think it's abundantly clear that you have done it, because what I said would not have landed if you hadn't done the work that you've done.
Yeah.
Right? It would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Right. So definitely I just want to acknowledge and validate that it's clear that you have done it. And this isn't about, oh, it's not enough, I didn't do enough, when is this going to end? It's whatever I did prior got me here, and now is the time to explore a different aspect of this. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look at the work that you've done from the outside looking in, it sounds very heady. And what I mean by that is the cognitive processing of what had happened. I understand it. I'm aware of it. I see the patterns of it. I see how it connects to different aspects of my life. I see how the patterns ripple out to things I'm experiencing right now. So, is that accurate from your vantage point?
Oh man. I mean, with this work, it's been cognitive, and it's been visceral, and it's been, I mean, if there's a type of work to do, I've done it. But I'm sure there's a part of it that I kind of hid away, which is why I was so surprised when I had that memory about I became a doctor because of this thing that happened when I was 5. I mean, that was a shock to me that, we went into some sort of little meditation. It's like, and that happened, that came up, and I was like, whoa. And yeah. So is there, I mean, have I more recently done more heady work? Yeah, probably. And the question is like, how do I get through it? What do I do now? What's the next step?
Perfect. So what's your experience like diving into this on a somatic perspective?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of somatic work. I have a friend who does that, and we're supposed to do a session, and we just haven't done it. So, but I'm afraid, because I'm afraid you're going to make me cry.
Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do any somatic work
I
here.
don't want to cry on the podcast. I've already
You
had a
wouldn't be
little
the
bit of
first one.
tears.
You would be in good company. So don't worry. And that's actually part of the reason why I'm asking you that question. Whenever I have clients or guests that come from a background where they have excelled because of their intellectual gifts, the part that's seldom caught up to their cognitive ability and understanding of their issues is actually the emotional, somatic, and embodied aspects.
Mm-hmm.
You have excelled in life and you've gotten through traumatic times because you got really good at using your mind to push away, outthink, or outmaneuver emotions.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay,
I'm a
perfect.
little bit autistic that way. I mean, I truly am. So that's why I was able to, I mean, I can focus, right? We talked about being able to focus, and I can focus on like on a long-term goal and all those things. Which is why I think I said that this has been such a frustrating thing for me, because I've never had trouble meeting a goal before, ever. Like if I put my mind to it, like I've gotten it always. And that's why this has been so frustrating for me, because my measure of success is, millions of dollars, rather than like, let's have fun.
Correct. And if you even just look at that distinction, it goes back to exactly what I was saying. Millions of dollars, which is an objective way to measure success. I can count it, I can point to it, it makes sense to everybody, I can prove it. Fun, I can do none of those things. And one is purely a reflection of my ability to cognitively get through med school. And then, yes, obviously there's a kinesthetic aspect to, the work that you did. But especially when you're in a proving energy, how do you prove you're having enough fun? You can't. And unlike money, fun, fulfillment, self-worth, these are all feelings. And where do you feel your feelings? In your head or in your body?
It depends on the feeling.
Okay, so is
But
that
most,
true? What
what?
feelings do you feel in your head?
Most feelings I feel in my head. I feel
Okay,
love in
so
my
pause
heart.
right there.
Yeah.
Give me an example of feeling you feel in your head.
Um, I feel like excitement, like right here. This is where excitement is. It's in my head.
Okay, what's the sensation of excitement?
Um, it has to do with like smiling and the way it feels to smile.
Okay, so that's a description of what your body does when you're in excitement.
Yeah.
What's the sensation and where does it happen inside of yourself
Um,
when you're excited?
I don't I the sensation I mean, I'm telling you, it's like right here on the top of my forehead. Um, but it's just like a presence. I can't call it like whether it's a pain or a buzzing or anything. I don't have any of that.
Okay, great.
Just a presence.
Is there any feelings that you feel in your body?
I feel love in my heart.
Okay, great.
Okay. So when I think about someone I love deeply, it's it's like right here. And I'm sorry you can't see, but it's
Yeah,
it's it's just in the middle of my chest.
perfect.
Um and that almost feels warm.
Good. Very
Yeah.
nice. What about doubt?
Doubt's like I'm on the right side of my head.
Okay, perfect. What about self-worth?
Wow. That's really interesting. It just showed up on the left side of my throat.
Beautiful. What about when you have to prove something?
Oh, that comes right out of my eyes.
Perfect. Okay. What do you think is the pattern amongst everything that I've asked you?
Uh, I don't know. Most things are in my head,
Correct. Your whole experience of your emotions is from the neck up,
except for love.
except for, which is beautiful, actually. It's not common, but it's beautiful. So let's just say if that's the only, let's just even go conservatively, 80% of the emotions that you experience from the neck up.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about your connection to your body?
Oh, I'm probably not very connected.
Not at all. Okay. Now, going back to your question of, well, what do I still have left to do? How do you think you can process emotional problems if you're disconnected from 80% of your emotional experience?
Yeah. Okay. That goes back to like Bessel van der Kamp, right? The body keeps a score.
100%.
Yeah.
And in your instance, you don't even know what score your body's keeping.
Yeah. I dissociated from my body when I was a child because of all the abuse.
100%.
Yeah.
And your pattern is the rigid pattern, which is why you're so intellectually good. And rigid pattern people, everything goes up to the head.
Hmm.
So what they have the most trouble doing is actually connecting to their core and asking, who am I? What's authentically me? Because those are questions of emotions in somatic resonance. They're not logical things you put into boxes.
And it's so funny because I've been asking this question since November of 2021, and I haven't been able to answer it. And now I know
Correct.
why.
Because you're disconnected from the source of the answer.
Yeah. Okay. This has been
So
really good.
what's landing for you here?
Well, I mean, I've got work to do, right? I need to like connect to my back to my body. And I think that through like this commitment to exercise, that's a big part of it for me.
So
You
the
know,
reason that that worked for you is because exercise by definition puts you back into your body,
yeah.
right? So your life experience here and the answers to these questions, like there's a big longing to really reconnect to who you are holistically.
Hmm.
This is Michelle as a whole being, body and mind interconnected, speaking together, and most importantly, not compartmentalized because of traumatic patterns that you don't need anymore to survive.
Right.
So that's a beautiful awareness to be in, but there's also a lot of navigating to do to reconnect those two together.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not easy. I mean, it's, it's so funny because I used to get a lot of massages and I always thought that I was going to release emotion during massages and I never did.
So the experience you have there, and that happens often with exercise too, is you get to recycle, you don't get to release.
Mm.
So you get a little bit of the relief because you get some movement, but it's the equivalent of like shifting around a balloon. You press it and you shift it, but the water's still inside.
Yeah.
The reason you can't get the actual release of all of these things is because there's a lot of parts of you that are afraid to reconnect to your body. You have to make peace with those parts first before you actually dive in and then begin to actually do the work of looking around what's inside, integrating all of that and all the other
That
pieces.
sounds like shadow work.
Yeah, it's shadow work from a more emotional somatic perspective. Correct.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So as much as I would love to do that work on you here, that's beyond the scope of this episode.
Of
But
course.
does that feel complete for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that really is very helpful. Nobody's ever, I mean, I've had plenty of coaches and I've never had somebody uncover that before. So that's that's exciting because now like I have a direction to work in.
Beautiful. So in that case, why don't you summarize for us, what did you come into this conversation, wanting to do or expecting to do, and then what were your aha moments as a result?
I come to every podcast open. Like I'll talk about just about anything. And I never want to hide anything. And so I didn't expect a whole lot other than I figured that something would happen where I would be uncovered at some point, which was I did not want to do this podcast. I was really afraid because I thought that something, it scared me, which is why I did it. Um, so I was afraid. I think I was afraid of being seen, which is silly because like I want to be seen, and so it's like that whole kind of thing. Um, so expectation wise, I didn't really know what to expect other than I was afraid of it. Um, I'm excited now about this because this is going to give me something to work on and as I go forward. So this is
Beautiful.
good.
Love it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
why don't you, you're very welcome. Why don't you then just close this off and let everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you? Floor is yours for that.
Yeah. So right now, I you can sign up for my email newsletter at drmichellegordon.com. That's drmichellegordon.com. And it's the best newsletter. Can I swear? Is it okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the best fucking newsletter for midlife professional women. And it's all about happiness and productivity and women's health and more. So you can sign up there. And when you get on the newsletter, I'll tell you about my offerings.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, as always, we will include that in the show notes.
Thanks.
But yeah, thank you very much for coming on and allowing yourself to be witnessed in this way,
Thanks
because
so
I know it
much for
wasn't a
having
small
me.
thing. Very
Yeah,
welcome.
this was good. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So enjoy, and for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.